Hey everyone, I'm really excited for our panel today. We're a little bit shorter on time, so I'm gonna just jump into intros right here. So could you guys give a brief background on yourself and what you're working on?
Yeah, so I'm Mickey Maher. I've spent 13 years in the gaming space, the last 2 at Dapper Labs, and if we don't know who Dapper Labs is, we created CryptoKitties. And what we're currently working on, and what I'm currently working on, is we're launching a Layer 1 blockchain specifically for games, entertainment apps, and digital collectibles. And as head of platform partnerships and revenue, I'm handling everything go-to-market from a partnerships perspective for the Flow blockchain currently.
My name is Devin Finzer. I'm one of the co-founders of OpenSea. OpenSea was started in late 2017, shortly after CryptoKitties launched, and it's a marketplace for non-fungible tokens, so sort of like eBay, where you can buy and sell and trade these types of assets. We sort of span beyond just the gaming space, although gaming is where we're seeing the most volume and activity, but we also allow you to trade things like ENS names, and we've even had some event ticketing projects as well.
All right, and then I'm Chris Chapman. I'm the executive producer at Blockade Games. We make Neon District, if you guys have heard about that, Neon District. I started it in the games, 15, 20 years ago. Ended up at Disney doing virtual world stuff there. I was at Decentraland for a little bit, helping them out with stuff. And then Marguerite, my CEO at Blockade, she employed her tractor beam and sucked me right in. So since then, I've been working on Neon District. And we're basically working on pioneering the free-to-play aspect for blockchain games, if you can imagine such a thing. And so that's the direction where we think everything is going to go.
Got it. So I think when a lot of people hear the words blockchain gaming, I think there's some skepticism, like why blockchain is needed. So could you explain the things that are uniquely enabled by having blockchain in gaming? So like what are some exciting games or gaming use cases that you've come across?
Yeah, I think part of the skepticism comes from traditional gaming folks or incumbent gaming folks. And a reason for that is that you have to think of blockchain gaming for what it is. It's an entirely new platform, and the types of games that we will be seeing built on the blockchain that will be successful will be native blockchain experiences. It probably doesn't look a lot like what you would think of maybe of a traditional game. And you saw the same with platform shifts into Facebook. Although short-lived, it was huge at the time. The incumbents, the traditional game companies didn't move into there. They let the hobbyists and indie developers play with the social hooks and what that platform had to offer until they came in. And the same thing in mobile. The first movers on the iPhone were not Activision or Disney or EA. It was more like Rovio and Supercell and King. So with any platform shift, because game companies are only as good as their next game or their next hit, they're focused on what they know and they invest in what they know. And they'll come in late when others have proven the road and the strategy on how to take advantage of a new platform. So I think a lot of skepticism comes from that. That was a long-winded way. So I'll let them answer what some of the things the blockchain unlocks.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think the other interesting thing to kind of keep in mind is I don't think anyone's really cracked it yet. CryptoKitties certainly had its bubble moment and drew in a lot of excitement for what this kind of platform could do. But I don't think that there's really a blockchain game that you could point to and say, like, this is working really well. There's a couple of games that are kind of working at a small scale and are sort of experimenting with what things might work well at a larger scale. But I think it's, the kind of echo is that it's really early days. What I think blockchain adds to gaming is, I think, it's a transition sort of from a closed market economy, or a closed economy, to a free market economy. Like, that's the broad shift. And that comes with a lot of challenges, right? So you lose control of sort of all of the different levers that you get when you own every single piece of the economy, but there's things that you can potentially gain, and there's ways that you can kind of expand the market by allowing things like third-party marketplaces to exist, things like games on top of games, and again, that's kind of like a lot of that has yet to be explored, but we're sort of in the initial stages where we're seeing some of those dynamics. I think marketplaces are sort of the first of those dynamics to play out, but there's going to be a lot over the next couple of years, I think.
Yeah, and the marketplaces play an important part in where I think everything is going, because if you think about it, when you're tokenizing assets on the open economy, right? And the players own them themselves. They're invested in it. They're playing their games. They're building up equity, value. They're exchanging. They're playing, right? So they're exchanging their time for putting value into these assets. And so, if you think about that, it's whenever you exchange your time for money, it's basically a job, right? And so the open marketplaces kind of unlock this ability to realize this value that players have just, so it's a cycle, right? So the player plays a game, they build up value and equity into these tokens, these assets, like their horse armor for you WoW people. That was a funny thing. Anyway, so they build up all this equity in these things, and then they have some place to sell them, and they can make money, and then they can go do that. And so it's this cycle that only can exist with an open economy, blockchain stuff. Like these don't work in closed ecosystems because it requires cooperation amongst everything.
Gotcha. Did you want to add?
Do you mind if I add to that? So I would cut it. So Devin is right that we're in the very early stages, and CryptoKitties famously crashed Ethereum, and we pushed the limitations of that blockchain with 10, 15, 20,000 users maybe. If you looked at a traditional game, especially a mobile game, you wouldn't even get off the ground or launch anything if it was only attracting 10 to 20,000 users. So we are very much in the early stages. So I think one thing that we've unlocked so far, what blockchain gaming what it unlocks or what it does different than any other platform, is the true ownership of the asset piece. That's really what we've touched on. But there's some other things that are really interesting that can and should be unlocked that we truly believe in Dapper Labs and CryptoKitties. One is, and we've heard a lot about it on the other panels and from some of the other speakers, is composability. But it's always, at this conference especially, it's composability that has to do with DeFi. Well, composability is also a huge thing in gaming and blockchain gaming. It's what we say is the thing that will unlock the open worlds within gaming on blockchain. So that's a really important thing for us, and we believe that that's the future in this. And then the alignment of incentives between developer and player, the true economies where you're spending time, you have equity as a player, and the more time and equity you have as a player, the better off the developer's doing, so it's an alignment of incentives. And then the NFT thing is really cool from a digital asset perspective, especially things like being able to mutate your digital asset or your NFT from one thing to another. And I like to use this example that we saw in CryptoKitties. This is a composability and a NFT mutation example. When we launched CryptoKitties, we had something called the Kittyverse pop up, and the Kittyverse is essentially 40 to 50 hobbyists or developers that built on top of CryptoKitties, leveraging our open source smart contracts. And one of the apps that was built was called Kitty Hats, and Kitty Hats is essentially accessories for your kitty. So you could buy, obviously, a hat or a scarf or whatnot for your cat. So the composability aspect was the developer came in, permissionally our built an app with, you know, permissionlessly on top of our smart contract. Then they sold our kitties hats. You could put your hat on your cat, thus mutating the NFT. And which was unique and interesting about that is the cat had the ownership of the hat, not the user. So once the hat went on the cat, it went with the cat. It stayed on the cat, and if you tried to take it off, it would dissolve or it would, you know, consume itself. So that's just and that was such a small scale. And if you unlock that to millions of users at a large scale, it could be very interesting.
And that kind of leads into my next question. So, Devin, you mentioned that all these games right now are pretty much at a small scale. So, what is missing to get us to more users?
Yeah, I would point to maybe a couple different pieces. I think I don't see it as one unlock. Maybe it will be, but one is just general infrastructure around these games. So, you know, to buy something on OpenSea, for example, you have to acquire ETH, and that's still not the greatest experience. We have like a button where you can add funds, but it's still just like requires a lot of understanding. So being able to buy these things with a credit card or debit card and a better wallet experience that's not, MetaMask is a great wallet, but it can be a little bit unfriendly for a mainstream user. So I think one category of things is just general architecture that's going to bring the whole space forward, DeFi as well as NFTs. So I'm super excited about that. Then the second one maybe is a little more important, which is just the quality of the gaming experiences. So right now, there's a lot of experiments out there. They're really cool, but I think if you gave them to a traditional gamer, the amount of fun they would have would not be enough to kind of motivate them to get into this ecosystem. And I think that can come both from traditional game talent coming in and trying things and iterating, which is happening. And then also kind of these indie developers really like taking different shots or different at-bats with like different ideas and things I think that, as Mickey mentioned, like maybe don't look like games at first, but turn into like these really interesting experiences. As an example, last night we had on OpenSea some land in a virtual world called CryptoVoxels sold for around $100,000. And this was a guy, it was one developer. He started this project 2 years ago. And I think he's still a team of one person. He might have hired someone. But his land is now the top traded NFT. It's bigger than Gods Unchained. It's bigger than CryptoKitties. It's bigger than Decentraland, which was a project that did I think a multi-million-dollar ICO. And he's just built this really cool project, and people are excited about it, and the land has been going up in value. So I think people underestimate the potential of these like smaller players, and I think it's a really good time for the tinkerers and the people who are just like trying a bunch of cool stuff.
Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. I mean, I agree with Devin that there's a lot of things that are going to need to fall into place for us to unlock mainstream users. Probably an interesting one to this crowd is going to be you won't be able to get mainstream users into crypto and NFTs and gaming, all of this stuff, if you go straight for complete decentralization. Because that, like the RB Dragons, like that's a whole lot of work and it's a whole lot of mess and it's going to take a whole lot of iteration and a lot of broken things and whatever. So it's going to be required to kind of crawl, walk, run your way there. And so you'll want to start with a centralized piece, especially with games, right? Like, so there's so much logic and like emergent gameplay stuff that needs to be sort of corralled, that it makes it hard to do that in a decentralized manner. And so if you can like initially build a lot of these pieces in a centralized manner where, you know, you can kind of like tweak the levers, right? You have levers to tweak, and then kind of lean on the decentralized piece as your underlying economy and sort of like meet in the middle. That's going to be a like one of these unlock steps, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think as both panelists have said that there's two real things preventing it from moving forward. One is the technology. I mean, we crashed or we slowed Ethereum to a halt at 15 to 20,000 users. If we want to move this space forward and bring in the mass market, that just can't happen. There needs to be a scalable solution. And on top of that, just the friction of bringing users on board. There's multiple ways and thoughts about how to fix that, whether it's making free-to-play games, whether it's making things not decentralized, or making things centralized at first and progressively make them decentralized. A lot of thoughts around that, but those things need to be addressed. And then the other side of it, the content or the entertainment value of the projects that are being built. Now, we're addressing that internally with our game studio by bringing on large, well-known global IPs and building games leveraging that IP. So one that we have announced that I can talk about is a partnership with the National Basketball Association, the NBA. We're doing a blockchain game collectible experience with the NBA. There are 2 other IPs that we have signed that I can't announce yet, but shortly we'll announce, that will be doing the same thing. So the NBA has about 1.5 billion global fans. So with their help, we'll be able to target a number of those fans and hopefully bring them into this ecosystem.
So was that from the learnings of after building CryptoKitties and Cheese Wizards, or are you going to be planning on building these kind of things in parallel with more like native crypto type games?
Everything we're doing and have done has been built on the learnings of past projects. So no matter whether it's building our own layer 1 protocol, it was built on very much of the learnings of CryptoKitties. Cheese Wizards was launched to honestly test some of the most interesting things that we saw happen behind the scenes of CryptoKitties to see if we can replicate that, in which we did. And that will lead us down a path to integrate those types of things into any future blockchain games. But also, like, we now have a much bigger studio than the 5 or 6 people that built CryptoKitties. We have professional game developers. So I think anything that we push out that's leveraging this IP will just be much more interesting, in-depth gaming experience than anything that we've built in the past. So we're trying to push this space forward and learn and improve on what we've done and what others have done in the space.
And then Devin, beyond the crypto voxels the sale, what other interesting trends have you been seeing on OpenSea?
Yeah, so even sort of beyond gaming, I guess I would say maybe there are 3 categories of projects at the moment. So there's games, so card games are really big. There's kind of this natural analog. People want to own digital magic cards and have an entire economy around the cards in addition to gameplay. So that's super big. Gods Unchained and Skyweaver are kind of the 2 ones there. And then I think Neon District kind of falls in that blockchain gaming category. Dapper Labs experiments and things like that. Top Shot, I guess you'd call that a game, right? Not just a collectible experience.
I will answer that in a couple of sentences. Anything that we do is going to have an engagement or a gaming loop to it. We don't think CryptoKitties would have been successful as just a pure collectible experience. It was that very simple breeding mechanic that got people engaged and kept them coming back. So I don't think a pure collectible experience will succeed in this space. You need some engagement loop to go with it.
Got it. Yeah, and so outside of gaming, what we're seeing is a second category I would almost call a grab bag, but consists of Ethereum name service names. So these are essentially decentralized domain name equivalents. There's now a landscape of these types of projects. There's a couple other naming services. I think Ethereum name service is kind of the one that's furthest along, but a couple other are launching as well. Tickets are falling under that category, but all of those are pretty small in terms of actual usage and volume. And then the third category that I think is actually pretty interesting is digital art. So digital art has actually come quite a long way since CryptoKitties kind of inspired that whole movement of digital ownership. So there's now 6 or 7 different projects that are all bringing regular artists or crypto-oriented artists on board, tokenizing their art and allowing them to be sold on secondary marketplaces. And then what's interesting about those is that those pieces of art can be brought into virtual world experiences like Decentraland or CryptoVoxels. So it was kind of a surprising thing to us. We didn't really think digital art would be one of the first use cases, but it is sort of starting to pick up. So gaming, digital art, and kind of that grab bag are the 3 categories I would kind of focus on with NFTs right now.
I'll modify my statement quickly. I think digital art is a use case that does not need a gaming mechanic in it. I think that can stand alone. So quick modification.
I have so many questions on digital art, but a different panel. So Chris, I also want to understand how you're changing the NFT model within Neon District compared to traditional blockchain games, since I know you guys released a post on this.
Yeah. No, it's a long post. I wrote it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
You could just summarize in like 2 minutes.
14,000 words or something like that. The interesting piece here from that is it's probably 2 pieces, right? So we've got the front end part and then the back end part. So for the front end part, it's about kind of unlocking mainstream adoption, and like I said earlier, free to play use. Because if you look at the sort of the history of games or whatever, once we got to that free to play period, all of a sudden everyone everywhere is playing games because it's super accessible. Once you wire down the UX, it's great. So we're using a side chain to kind of unlock this free to play mechanic. And with this side chain, we can avoid things like gas fees and scalability issues and such like that, because we're not on the same chain as everybody else, right? We can just scale up our own stuff. And so what we do is we have a huge top of the funnel then that we've unlocked. Okay, and then once we do that, our secret sauce for our tokens are that they are kind of in the composability aspect of it, is that you can level up your equipment and your gear and your characters, right? So when I was saying earlier, about the, you put time into your thing and all of a sudden it's more valuable, like this is a literal thing. Like you are playing with your items and you're literally leveling them up. And so this item is now more powerful than when it started because you've been putting your time into it. And so you have translated your time into power, and you can then push this out onto the open market, and so the flow is there. You have to do this carefully, be careful if you're going to do this, because it's easy to get caught in a pay for power perspective, and you don't want that, because that's a good way to kill a multiplayer game. Because if all of your whales accumulate all the most powerful items, then nobody else wants to play because all the whales have all the powerful stuff. And so you need to design your game in a way, and we have, that avoids those kind of missteps, right? So things need to be powerful, but situationally powerful. That's why Magic has stayed around for so long. They've got like 16,000 cards or something crazy like that, and 30 years of gameplay. And it's because, this particular card is really powerful in this particular situation, not in all situations. So everything always has a counter. Everything's very rock, paper, scissors. Like rock is not more powerful than, right? And so if you start with that mindset, so you open up the top of the funnel, and then you have the mindset where you can accumulate power, then everything else kind of just falls into place, assuming your game is fun, right? I mean, that's probably the most important piece, is the game's got to be fun. But that's the magic there on our particular model is that we've unlocked the free-to-play piece, and then we've unlocked the make your game items more like, the more time you put into them, the more valuable they are.
Awesome, thank you. So we're out of time, but I really enjoyed the panel, and I'm assuming you guys will be around a bit if you guys want to chat more. Okay.
Thank you.
Of course, yes, thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.